We often think of queens in crowns, elegant, powerful, untouchable. But behind palace walls, many of them faced a different kind of pressure. To give birth, again and again. Some gave life to kings, empires, even war. This is not just a story about royalty. It's a story about women, their bodies, their burdens, and their bloodlines. For centuries, royal women were not judged by their words, but by their wombs. Not by how well they ruled beside kings. Not by their wisdom in council rooms. Nor by their elegance in court banquets, double quotes, but by the one duty no crown could fulfill, producing heirs, healthy, legitimate, royal heirs. Some queens gave birth to one child, others to two or three, but a rare few gave more. Much more. They didn't just birth sons and daughters. They birthed legacies, dynasties, empires. Their fertility wasn't just biological, it was political, weaponized, required, expected. Behind each royal lineage, stood a woman whose body bore the weight of a nation's future. These are not just the names in history books. They are the engines of bloodlines, the architects of royal succession, and their stories will surprise you. September 8, 1761. A shy 17-year-old German princess steps onto British soil, never having met the man she was about to marry. Her name was Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, and within 6 hours of her arrival, she was married to King George III of Great Britain. She didn't speak fluent English. He'd never seen her face until that day. But what followed was one of the most unusual royal partnerships in British history. Queen Charlotte would go on to give birth to 15 children over a 21-year period, 15 among them two future kings, George IV and William IV, a Queen of Württemberg, and a legacy that reshaped European royalty. But this wasn't a woman of endless ease and comfort. Her role wasn't just to smile and wave from palace balconies. She raised her children herself, something unheard of for a royal. She advocated for education, for music. She became the patron of Mozart before the world knew his name. But her life was far from peaceful. Her husband, King George III, suffered from a debilitating mental illness. His famous madness wasn't just a national crisis. It was a personal heartbreak. As his condition worsened, Charlotte became both queen and caregiver, protecting the crown, shielding her children, and managing a royal court that whispered behind her back. Despite the pressure, the loneliness, and the quiet pain, she remained devoted to Britain, to her husband, and to her children. Her blood runs through Europe to this day. She was the great-great-great-great-grandmother of Queen Elizabeth II. And even Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, is said to share her ancestry, a reminder that history isn't just written in books, but in bloodlines. 15 children, a fractured marriage, a kingdom held together by grace under fire. Queen Charlotte didn't just give birth to heirs, she gave birth to a royal legacy that still echoes through palaces today. Maria Theresa, a name that echoes with both power and motherhood. She wasn't just a queen, she was an empress. And not by marriage, by birthright. The first and only female ruler of the Habsburg dominions. While most royal women were groomed to support a throne, Maria Theresa sat on it herself and ruled with iron will, all while bearing 16 children. Through war, diplomacy, and childbirth, she kept an empire alive. But she didn't just bear children, she deployed them. Her daughters were used as political pawns, married into nearly every major European dynasty. Marie Antoinette became the Queen of France. Another daughter ruled Naples. Another, Parma. Her sons. They ruled too. Joseph II became Holy Roman Emperor. Leopold II followed him. Even her grandsons sat on powerful thrones. She built a network of influence that no army could march through, but every throne felt. Maria Theresa combined empire and motherhood in a way few ever have. She ruled like a man, but she bore like a mother of nations. Her fertility wasn't personal, it was strategy. And it changed the balance of European power forever. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages. She wasn't born to be quiet, she was born to command. She became Queen of France by marriage to Louis VII, but that wasn't enough. After their marriage ended, she did the unthinkable. She married the future King of England, Henry II. Yes, Eleanor was Queen of France, then Queen of England. And from those two marriages came 10 children. Among them, Richard the Lionheart, one of the most legendary Crusader kings in history, and King John, signer of the Magna Carta. But Eleanor wasn't content to simply produce kings. She advised them, opposed them, even rebelled against them. She was imprisoned for 16 years by her own husband, and then returned to power as regent when her sons ruled. Eleanor's womb gave Europe to dynasties, but her mind gave it a queen who wouldn't stay silent. She used every role society gave her: wife, mother, prisoner, queen, and bent them to her will. History remembers her sons, but Eleanor made them, and Eleanor shaped them. She ruled an empire where the sun never set. But inside her palaces, Queen Victoria lit a different kind of legacy, one made of children and marriages. and Bloodlines. Queen Victoria gave birth to 9 children. But what made her truly powerful was how she married them off. Each child became a royal seed planted across Europe's great monarchies. Her daughter Victoria married into the Prussian court. Alice went to Hesse, Beatrice to Battenberg, Helena to Schleswig-Holstein. Her son, Edward VII, would become king after her. But her real impact went far beyond Britain. She became known as the grandmother of Europe, because nearly every royal family today, from Spain to Sweden, shares her blood. Even the tragic Serena of Russia, Alexandra, was her granddaughter. Through one royal womb, Victoria created a web of dynasties, so tightly woven that, when World War I broke out, Europe's monarchs were literally cousins fighting cousins. But Victoria was more than just a matriarch. She was a woman of intense emotion, a passionate wife to Prince Albert, a grieving widow who wore black for 40 years, a strict but devoted mother. She hated childbirth, calling it the shadow side of marriage, and yet she endured it 9 times. She had the power of a sovereign and the burden of a mother. Victoria's story reminds us, fertility isn't just about numbers. It's about strategy, survival, and statecraft. One woman, 9 children, a continent forever changed, and her blood, still sitting on thrones today. In the violent heart of Renaissance France, there was a woman behind the throne, whose power came not from a crown, but from the 10 children she bore. Her name, Catherine de' Medici. Born into the powerful Medici family of Florence, she married Henry, the second son of the French king, not a queen yet. But when death swept through the royal court, Catherine rose, and her womb became France's most valuable treasure. She gave birth to 10 children, including 3 future kings of France, Charles IX, Francis II, and Henry III. Each time the monarchy trembled, a child of Catherine de' Medici was placed on the throne, and Catherine, she ruled behind them, as regent, advisor, protector, and sometimes feared manipulator. She was no passive mother. She is remembered as one of history's most cunning political minds, feared, hated, called the Black Queen. She navigated through civil wars, religious conflict, and assassinations, all while keeping her bloodline on the throne. But it came at a cost. Of her 10 children, only a few lived to adulthood, and of those, none left legitimate heirs. The once flourishing Valois line, Catherine's legacy, would die with her son still. Catherine's fertility didn't just create a dynasty, it created a decade of power. She ruled France from behind veils, windows, and throne rooms she never sat on. A queen in everything but name, because in the end, her true crown wasn't gold. It was survival, a woman who birthed kings, and then ruled through them. In a world where women were never meant to rule at all, in an age where queens were seen as decoration, Isabella of Castile carved herself into history. With sword, scripture, and 5 royal children, she was never supposed to rule. But when her half-brother died, she seized the throne of Castile by force, by faith, and with a marriage that would change the world. Her husband, Ferdinand of Aragon, together, they united Spain. But Isabella was never just a consort. She ruled as a sovereign, signed laws, led armies, and carried the weight of a crown while giving birth to 5 children, each one piece of her empire. Daughter Isabella became Queen of Portugal. Her son John was meant to inherit Spain, but died too young. Another daughter, Maria, became Queen of Portugal after her sister, and her youngest, Catherine of Aragon, would marry into the Tudor dynasty of England, becoming the first wife of Henry VIII. But perhaps, the most powerful of her children, was Joanna, known to history as Juana la Loca. Joanna would marry Philip the Handsome of the Habsburgs, and give birth to Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, ruler of a global empire that stretched from Spain to the Americas. Isabella gave birth to just 5 children, but their marriages and offspring would shape Europe for generations. She was more than just fertile. She was strategic, devout, relentless. The woman who funded Columbus, the queen who expelled the Moors, the mother who birthed an empire. Isabella's legacy didn't lie in how many children she had, but in what each child became. Not a dynasty of luxury, but of dominance. She didn't just give birth to kings and queens. She gave birth to a new world. She was quiet, modest, rarely spoken of in history books. But Queen Louise of Denmark may be one of the most influential mothers in European history, not because she ruled an empire, but because she created one. She gave birth to 10 children, and nearly all of them married into the most powerful royal families in Europe. Her daughter Alexandra married Edward VII of the United Kingdom, becoming the queen consort of Great Britain. Another daughter, Dagmar, married the future Tsar Alexander III of Russia, and became Empress Maria Feodorovna. That made her the mother of Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia. Another child, George I, became king of Greece. Her sons and daughters extended into Norway, Belgium, Luxembourg, and more. By the end of her life, Queen Louise had become the ultimate royal matchmaker. So many monarchs traced their lineage to her that she became known as the mother-in-law of Europe. She wasn't a warrior queen. She didn't lead crusades or write decrees, but through 10 carefully placed children, she connected the crowns of Russia, Britain, Greece, Norway, and Denmark. One Danish queen, a modest throne, but a reach that changed the face of European royalty forever. And while wars would later tear these families apart, they all began in the quiet palace halls of Copenhagen, with one woman, one marriage, and 10 royal children. We've seen their numbers, their children, their dynasties, but behind the royal portraits, behind the golden cradles, was a brutal truth. Motherhood was not a choice. It was a duty, a demand, a pressure written into the very blood of queens. For royal women, fertility wasn't private, it was political. A queen who could not conceive was seen as a failure. Whispers followed her in court. She could be exiled, divorced, even replaced. Every pregnancy came with risk. Every birth was a battlefield. There were no hospitals, no anesthesia, just candlelight herbs, and the silent fear of death. Stillbirths, miscarriages, babies, lost before they were named. Mothers who bled and never stood up again. These were not rare. They were expected. Some queens gave birth in front of entire courts, their pain made public, their privacy stripped, just to prove the child was legitimate. And when the baby was a girl, the disappointment was immediate. A boy meant security. A girl, a problem to marry off. The crown weighed heavy on a queen's head, but heavier still was the burden carried in her womb. For every child born, there was another never spoken of. A palace could feel like a prison, and a cradle, like a cage. They were mothers, but they were also political tools. Queens, yes, but first and foremost, producers of heirs. Behind every throne sat a woman who had bled, suffered, endured, and often been forgotten until now. One child can change a family, but many children, they can change the world. Because in royal courts, fertility wasn't just about lineage, it was a weapon, a bargaining chip, a tool for diplomatic domination. Every birth was more than personal. It was political currency. A queen with multiple children didn't just secure succession, she launched alliances. A son married into Spain. That's peace. Across borders, a daughter becomes queen in a rival empire. That's influence without invasion. It was chess and queens. They were the queen piece, powerful, mobile, and strategic. Let's look again. Maria Theresa didn't just bear 16 children. She used them to create a network of Habsburg power across Europe. Queen Victoria's 9 children married into nearly every European dynasty, so that by World War I, 3 major monarchs of Britain, Germany, and Russia were all her grandsons. Catherine de' Medici's sons held the throne during France's bloodiest century, and her daughters married into rival kingdoms to suppress revolt. Each queen's womb was a diplomatic front line. Each child a pawn or kingmaker, and with every alliance sealed by marriage, new empires rose. Old borders vanished. Wars were prevented or ignited. These women weren't passive vessels. They were the engine of empire. Their fertility built bridges, thrones, and bloodlines. We often remember the kings who led battles, but we forget the queens who made sure those kings were born. History remembers the kings, the conquerors, the signatures on treaties, the flags over battlefields. But behind each crown, behind every royal name carved in stone, was a woman who bled for that legacy. A queen, a mother, a survivor. They weren't just figures and portraits. They were flesh and bone, breathing through labor pains in candlelit rooms, facing death every time they gave life. They weren't just fertile, they were formidable. Their children became emperors, their grandchildren ruled continents. Their bloodline outlived kingdoms. And still, we reduce them to numbers, to who they married, to how many sons they gave the crown. But today, we remember more. We see the strength it took to survive palace expectations, the silence they carried, the dynasties they built in the dark. From Eleanor of Aquitaine's rebel heirs, to Victoria's global web, to Catherine de' Medici's dangerous court, these women didn't just make history, they delivered it. Their power wasn't always in their voice, it was in their womb, in their strategy, in the legacy they passed through blood. So, the next time you read about a king, look behind him. There's a queen whose story began with birth but didn't end there. These were the most fertile queens in history. And now, you know why it mattered. Like, subscribe and share for more hidden stories from the royal world. We remember the empires they built, but not the nights they cried in silence after losing a child. We celebrate their sons, but forget the pain that came with each birth. These women were more than mothers of monarchs. They were the backbone of history. Their fertility was praised, but their exhaustion was ignored. They were symbols of strength in public and vessels of sacrifice in private. So today, we honor them not just for the heirs they produced, but for the lives they lived and the battles they fought alone.